Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Go Fast, Grow Fast, where we talk with people in the trenches, building companies and growing revenue. Today, I have a really exciting guest, Justin, and he is at Workflow Labs, building some really fun stuff. So I will let Justin introduce himself, as always. Justin, welcome.
Thanks, Sean, for having me. Pretty excited to be here. It's a great podcast. I've listened to some of the episodes and just happy to be here.
Amazing. So tell me a little bit about your background and, what you're doing now.
Sure. So I guess we'll go way back to childhood, right? Like you want the full story?
Well, start with when your parents were born. That would be perfect.
Oh, really starts with my grandparents, I think is where the story starts. No, the story, my kind of professional journey that got me here it does start a little while ago. Coming out of grad school in 2005, I went and joined Amazon, which everyone thought was a pretty crazy idea at the time. It basically just sold books and electronics. And while all my classmates were going to like prestigious investment banking places, they're like, why would you go there? They sell like what, books? Stock price was like 33
doors for desks. I mean,
there's doors for desks. What is this? Like, how many books are people in the world going to buy? And they're like, didn't they almost go bankrupt recently? Stock price was at like $33. It was not like when you think about Amazon, we think about like a fast growing stock that is the center of the FANG. It was not that.
Right.
So I went to Amazon, worked in product management and helped launch new categories there like grocery and the consumables categories, which was a fascinating. If you want to know about the challenges of e-commerce, go try to sell water online and you will quickly learn like what works and doesn't work. But to move on from that part of the story, I was in this meeting one time and they have this saying at Amazon, and sometimes they don't say the whole thing, sometimes they just do the letters, and it's WWJD, and that stands for what would Jeff do? And I was like, I've been here a couple of years, the stock price is still at $33, and someone says, what would Jeff do? I'm like, well, he wouldn't work here. Like he would have started the company a long time ago. Like he definitely would not be in this meeting and he would not answer that question. So that was the day I was like, maybe I should do something else. So I left Amazon to start. I realized that e-commerce is going to be a big deal. Our numbers were growing very fast. Customer engagement was off the charts. Conversion was crazy. So I'm like, this is a big deal, but stock isn't moving. So this company's dead anyways. I'm going to go help brands directly figure out e-commerce and bring them to market. So I left Amazon and started what's called a managed services agency called IdeoClick, where we help brands understand e-commerce brand market. Immediately, Amazon stock goes through the roof, and the amount of money that I left on the table by making that decision, I try not to think about, but wake up to often. So I did that for about 14 years, and we helped 500. At its peak, we were doing like $25 million of recurring revenue, had a team about 150 folks, helping about 500 brands manage their business on Amazon, marketing, all the things. And then that was great. And through that journey, I got experience in a lot of things: how to build and grow a company, how to do sales and marketing, how to bring in investment into the company. We brought in a private equity company eventually, got a little bit of secondary out of that. And I learned a lot of things that are bad things. There are things that I guess may be good to know, but bad to go through. When COVID hit and supply chain crunched and we made our money based on product selling, and there was no products to sell, that was a really challenging time. The company went through some turmoil, and eventually I exited the company and they put in some more cash, new leadership, and eventually that company didn't transact for very much. So what would have been a personal outcome of a, call it an $80 to $100 million company essentially went to zero. But I said, I understand what the market needs. I understand who's trying to do what in the space, and said, I think I can provide that service without the 150 people. Most of the tasks that you do on a regular basis have to be done very accurately. They have to be done very regimentedly. It's very much what robotic process automation is designed to do. So I started a new company called Workflow Labs, and the point of this is really to help brands manage their day-to-day interactions with platforms like Amazon, but do it in a much more scalable, software-driven way. So, sorry for the evil monologue, but that's the background of what Workflow Labs is.
No, that's great, and that's we live in this world of potential automations where I still think we're so early in the possibilities. I feel like I've been talking about automation for 2 decades now, but it's still there's so much left. And now with AI, one of my partners always says A stands for automation intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. I feel like the world is opening up. So it's a really cool space to be in. And I understand you've raised money for this company as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So in the past company, I had the opportunity to raise money for a company that's profitable. And then in this instance, I got to raise money for a company that doesn't even exist. And I can tell you, it's a lot easier to raise money for companies that are profitable than companies that don't exist. When you're profitable and you have growing revenues that are recurring, people contact you. When
Yeah.
you have an idea and a dream, you have to go contact a lot of people. But luckily, having had some background and some knowledge in the space, it made it a little bit easier this time around. So I did the initial, I don't even know what people call rounds anymore. The round where you don't have anything and you go talk to friends and family. I started with that one. I raised $1 million through a safe note. And then we converted that last September with a secondary raise of $1.2 million. We've raised just a little over $2 million into the company. They definitely have a lot of thoughts on the right and wrong ways to raise capital. For us, it was really important to match the money you're bringing in with what you needed. If you bring in too much, you give away so much of the company, so much of the control of the future of the company. Bring in too little and you're dead. So finding that right space between the two amounts is an interesting balance.
Magic sweet spot. Right. Right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about just give a little more context about the company. How many customers, do you have now? How many versus how many employees? How quickly are you growing? Just give people an idea of really the situation that you're in right now.
Yeah. So we thought a lot about like, what is I think about speed every day. If there's anything, like if you have one most important thing to think about, I think we're just chatting a little bit before the call on this. And I think you're totally right. Like it's about how fast can you do something? The world is changing so quickly. AI is just only increasing the speed. Everything's increasing speed. Technology, cloud computing. Like you just don't need to spend the time doing stuff that you used to do. So we thought a lot about speed. My knowledge of the market, well, pretty deep in the space that I work in because I've been here for a while. I'm very old. It isn't going to last very long. So if you want to build a company you're planning to sell, like you need to think about it. Like, how do I build something and have something valuable that people want in 3 years from start to finish? And maybe you keep going and become something else. But if you can't get there in 3 years, then you've just magnified the unknowns that are going to affect your business by an exponential factor because of so much change that's going to happen. So it had to be fast. In the past, at I did, like we sold and we engaged and sold to brands directly. We'd go talk to a brand, you find them, you pitch the services, you go through the sales cycle, blah, blah, blah. Eventually you have a client. And that takes, I don't know, 2 to 6 months, depends on the client. And so when we did this, we said, we need to win the space. We want to be the default solution for how brands manage their e-commerce business. And to beat that, we probably need 2,000 clients, 2,000 or 3,000 clients. And if you multiply that by 2 to 4, 6, so you're not going to come up with 3 years. So we said, what is the leverage point that we can use in our space to get bigger faster, to become that default solution? And so we thought about a couple of different choke points on that, like who aggregates these brands and how can we partner with them so that we're a value add to the service they provide. And so I said, well, I don't know. I only know one thing, that's agencies. So I talked to all my friends that are in agencies and said, great, if we get a small number of these, even 15 or 20 of them, that's enough to get the 2,000 brands we need to be the default solution. So that became our strategy. So we went to market and I talked to, the biggest agencies in the space. We had an initial pilot with one that's now grown into 5 or 6 large agencies. And we have a number of emergent agencies, so call it like 12 in our system. And through those 12 agencies, right now we're servicing just a little over 400 brands to help manage their e-commerce business.
Right.
So that's been a great way for us to grow fast. And I think so far it's working. So we'll stick with it.
That's great. Yeah. So that's always, looking for those high leverage opportunities, right? Where you add one client and it actually adds more than one, right? And some people talk about B2C, B2B. Sometimes there's B2B to C. You're B to B to B to C. So really, really layering on the letters.
You sound like the initial investors I talked to about this business model. They're like, how can you be more direct? I'm like, well, we could, but we'll grow slower. It's like, that seems risky. True. But I know the people. So, the knowledge, going back to kind of one of the things we were chatting about, Sean, is like failures for the call. And like my last company definitely felt like a failure. If you see tens of millions of dollars of personal wealth evaporate, that feels like a failure.
Yeah.
And starting this one, I realized the thing that I had that was valuable was the network and the people. So this time around, I knew all the people I wanted to have on the team. I knew all the people I wanted to work with, and was able, before the product was even started, to go talk to them and say, what would make your business grow faster? What would be a value add and help you retain your clients as an agency? So then I already kind of had the testimonials and the validation that the model would work before, I was trying to convince someone with money that this thing wasn't a crazy idea.
Yeah. No, and this is actually really great because, I want to talk to people that are at different points in their journey, in their life cycle of their company, because what you do as a pre-seed startup is very different than what you do as a public company, right? What you do to get those first customers is not the same to get your 1,000th customer, right? And that's kind of where you're at, is you through your experience, which there's no shortcut for, unfortunately, you found that, okay, there is this one high leverage point where we can get a bunch of clients very quickly. And maybe that only lasts for a year. Maybe it lasts for a decade. It doesn't matter. It's still real revenue. And it gets your company to a point where you're actually alive. First and foremost, you actually have revenue coming in the door to pay for operations. So you said that, I know that a lot of people are going to ask, like, oh, great idea, get the company that has multiple clients, but how do I do that? And for you, you've spent so many years in the industry that you've just built up those relationships. If you didn't have those relationships, do you think you would have approached things differently?
Maybe. I guess it's like you sort of, after you've done something for a while, it becomes kind of second nature to you. So like I think a lot of the things that I knew I didn't have to, like, I kind of, when I was talking to someone, I would kind of know their world and like be able to speak the language easier with them. But the thing I did before all of that, I think applies regardless of how much experience you have. So what I did is I was kind of doing some soul searching, counting all the money I didn't have from the last event that still stung when you go to bed at night and wake up in the morning. Is I would go on LinkedIn and I would be like, all right, I should do something today to like figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow. And I would go on LinkedIn and be like, oh, look at all these people that I'm connected to that I never ever talk to, but they're amazing people, and they have amazing experience. And so what I started doing was I would go find one and I would write an email to them, and then I would schedule it to send later. Not today, not tomorrow, but like next week or the week after. And I would just sort of line up a bunch of these things and then kind of forget about them. You have like 25 or 30, everyone knows 25 or 30 people that are in their industry that will spend a half an hour talking to them. Because at the end of the day, we actually kind of like talking to each other as humans. And on these calls, I wasn't like selling them anything. I was just saying, how are the kids? What do you think about in the world? What do you like? What do you don't like? What problems are you facing? And just sort of like killing the time, make sure to end on time so people, like, you're not blowing up their day with this kind of meandering conversation. But as I forgot about them, like every day, these people were reaching out to me saying, hey, I'd love to chat with you. I'm like, look how popular I am. This feels good. And so my calendar kind of filled up to some degree with these people in the industry, and we would chat. And the amount of information you get around what you should do next from people when you're just chatting is so much more than if you're pitching an idea or trying to run an idea by them or something. Just literally talk to people. They will tell you what you need to know. This whole thing wasn't even my idea. This is just the outcome of all of those informal conversations.
Right. That's an awesome tactical, hack to kind of increase that luck surface area, right? Like you're just creating a system to expose yourself to more ideas and more perspectives so that one good one can actually come across your desk and you have the context to actually identify it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing that was great about it was, these people, they know each other. I mean, we're all kind of in the same space, and the people I'm reaching out kind of in the same, but they don't talk to each other either because everyone gets busy in their daily lives. So through that process, I got to be kind of a connector for some of them. Like, oh, I was just talking to so and so. They're talking on this thing. You should chat with them. And so kind of created, I'm not a social media mogul or anything, but for a moment in time, kind of created this hub that connected people. And I think that made them a little bit more invested in the thing I was trying to do, made us all feel like we're a bit on the same team
Yeah.
rather than me going it alone.
I think a lot of people, especially, more mid-level or junior people, they don't understand the value of a good introduction and like the value that accrues to you if you are that person who's in the middle saying, hey, you should go talk to that person because they were talking about the same thing. Like, people really appreciate that. And most people just don't have the time to even think about that and do that. So when somebody steps in and does that, like, it's really appreciated.
I agree with that. Sometimes it feels weird. You're like, am I doing this the right way? Or like, is this going to be awkward if I introduce
Yeah.
this person? But I found just sort of like letting yourself be kind of awkward is just fine. And it's kind of endearing to people.
Yeah. So, going back a little bit, so you're working with agencies to work with um, e-com sellers, right? And do you find any challenges with that? Because putting that, buffer between you and the end user, I mean, is that creating issues for you on the product development life cycle? Or how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you remove yourself, from your user, your end user or the person with the real need, like, like you've said, you got it another layer of information that you can't get through. It makes it harder to know better about what to do next. Um, so I would say, it creates challenges, but also opportunities. I'm a big believer in balance. Anytime something goes wrong, there's some benefit to it. You just have to look for it. Anytime something's great means something else isn't. So like you always kind of have to watch for the other side. And I think in this one, the nice thing for us was, if you're building a product, a software product, it's really easy to chase the end user or the use cases and be way off track. If you ever listen to a user and accept what they say as requirements, you are going to spend the next 6 months building the wrong thing. So the nice thing about this aggregation model is even though we're further from like what the end brand wanted or what kind of reports they'd want to see or what kind of actions they want to take, we're working with that agency and their main job is to keep that client from churning, keep that client happy. And they're looking at across hundreds of clients. So they know exactly what's going to cause that client to churn, what isn't going to cause that client to churn. And we're not going to chase end cases. We're whatever the unusual use case. We're going to chase all the main stuff that's going to apply to the most customers because that's what the agency really cares about. So that challenge became an opportunity for us to already have the problems aggregated from our client rather than say, asking every e-commerce director, how can we make your world better? Now, I mean, there are other challenges with it. I mean, there's always challenges. So now we need to look like a part of their service as opposed to like talking directly to the customer. Fine,
Yeah.
that's great. You have to be a great listener to say, how can we engage your users in a way that's going to represent you and your brand agency as opposed to being, workflow labs out there. So yeah, challenges, but opportunities, I'd say.
Yeah. And so with the stage that you're at, you said how you knew a lot of the agencies that you were going to want to bring in, from kind of the get-go. So are a lot of these partner sales, is that all led by you, or is there a dedicated person on the team that's kind of managing that? And how do you think about that going forward and scaling up? Obviously, you can only manage so many relationships as a founder CEO. There's also other things you have to do. So how are you handling that currently, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had an advantage in that coming out of IdeaClick, I was able to, I knew everybody's skill set. So my whole team, I've worked with them all for like 5+ years. I know what they're really good at, and they're amazing, amazing people. Honestly, I mean, don't tell them, but I don't do very much anymore.
No, this is recorded, right?
I found a couple of things. I found that the more I'm involved, the more I'm actually going to make things worse. So if I'm trying to talk directly to our clients and listen to them, I'm going to be promising stuff that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be saying things to them that they've already heard, or it just doesn't provide a lot of value. And I think a lot of my first time around, I did a lot of this. A lot of founders or kind of folks that are doing it the first time want to be involved in everything, and they feel like they have to be involved in everything. And somehow, if they're not the one leading the charge up every single mountain, that their team is going to think that they're asking them to do unreasonable things that they wouldn't do themselves. But I have found this time around it's much better to just get good people, ask them what they need, and be there to support them. Like they're your manager. You're there to make them great. So Lainey's awesome with our partners. She'd do a much better job than I ever would. We our selling model has been mostly folks that me and the team know, and so we go to conferences and chat with folks, and those folks introduce us to other folks, and so it's been very much a conversation-led referral business so far. So far, we don't need that many partners, and we know that. Eventually we'll get past the space and become something else. Like the idea of using automation to remove human hours from routine processes is not strictly relegated to e-commerce. So eventually when we get outside e-commerce, that's not going to work anymore. Like we're going to need a new way to go reach folks. And when we do that, we're going to hire someone else who's done that in the past, and I'm going to ask them what they need, and I'm going to make sure they have what they need, and they will do that. They will figure that problem out for us.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. That's a really good approach. And I mean, you're already a step ahead of a lot of startups in that, it tends to be the founder-led sale initially, and that tends to be a hurdle that is hard to get over in the scaling journey of getting past that founder-led sale. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, we have I have this way to describe that. So like when you're starting a company, it's kind of like starting a band. You don't say, "Hey, who's the best drummer?" You say, "Who's got a set of drums?" So
Yeah.
and so I think one of the things, all right, a couple of things on that. So when you assemble that team, you assemble that band. If that person with the drums isn't the right long-term drummer, it's important to have a conversation early on that says, "I need you to play the drums. I know maybe drumming isn't your end future, but you play the drums for now because this is what we need." And like, let's all know so it doesn't hurt feelings, or it isn't like a change in strategy later when we're like, all right, it's time for us to go hire the drummer so you can move into your specialty area, which might be the bass or something else. But this is what we need now. And like, here's our progression towards the future. And also giving those team members all a reason to care about the outcome of the band. My analogy might be breaking down. And a time frame as to how long this band needs to stay together. That allows everybody to have the flexibility to bring in new skill sets when your band composition has changed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that's great. So, you talked a little bit about, your past company, and, I always like to try and bring up what are some of the concrete things you've seen that don't work, and I'm curious if there's either from the past company or from this existing company, are there tactics or strategies that you guys have tried that they just didn't pan out for your particular situation?
So many. I think when you're in a company and you have an idea and you're going to implement this idea, you should know that 90% of your ideas will fail. Only 10%, and maybe probably higher. Like, I don't know, 95% of your ideas will fail. And it's not necessarily because they're bad ideas. It's because you haven't thought them all the way through. I got this lesson from my dev manager, and I relearn it every day. He's like, yeah, all these ideas you have are great, Justin, and maybe you're right, or maybe you're not. But what we should do is build the smallest thing possible and see what we don't know. And so you do something small, and part of it will be successful, and part of it'll fail, and you figure out what part was successful, and you're like, how do we magnify the tiny little successful part and eliminate the failure part? And that's how you can cost effectively build great things, is by failing a lot, but failing really, really small. But just to answer your question more directly, some of the things we really failed at in the past were incentives. Oh my gosh, did we have a terrible of a way of incenting behavior. Like if you want to tell people to care about like the success of the company and they don't actually have a personal way to calculate it or to estimate it or feel their impact on it on a regular basis, like that is just a failure waiting to happen. We did that many times wrongly, and I'm happy to describe some of those processes in greater detail. Partnerships, board management, investment strategy. I did everything.
Nice. That's the best education right there.
Yeah. So if you want to know any embarrassing personal stories about failure, I'm happy to go into any one of them. They'll be great. But for each one of those, I learned something and try to do a little bit more of the good, a little bit more of the positive this time around.
Yeah. No, and I mean, aligning incentives is, as a CEO, as a leader, that's probably one of the most potent tools that you actually have in your toolkit. Is if you want the right behavior, you have to incentivize it. And so thinking through what those are, whether it's a sales package, whether it's equity in the company, whether it's, for every layer of your company, you need to make sure those are heading in the direction you want the company to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not just this, and I guess that's an altruistic thought that most people probably have. It's kind of easy to think, oh, everyone should be aligned. Understanding what alignment means for an individual, I think it's like solving the hardest math problem on earth. And I actually don't know how to do it. For our stage, this time I said, I'm going to make the problem smaller. I can't figure out how to create personal incentives forever. But our company has a very specific goal. Like within X amount of years, we want to develop a product, get it to market, and have some sort of liquidity event. And at that point, maybe we become something bigger, or maybe we get sold to someone. And people at that point can decide if they want to continue the journey with the company, or maybe they want to go. So let's design a system where everybody knows what we're shooting for, and everybody can get a piece of what we achieve once we hit that milestone. And that incentive program will work for that period of time, and it won't work for whatever comes after next. And that would be a really hard one to figure out. Like, I don't know how you could possibly design an incentive structure for a big, public company that's going to exist for the next 100 years. Like, how do you make those people actually care? I don't know. Yeah. I couldn't figure that out. I can only figure this one out.
Yeah. Well, you've got a little bit of time to figure that out before you blow up and become that gigantic company, right?
Oh, so I would be the drummer that got replaced with someone else long before this company ever gets there.
Right. You know that. That's important. That's important. Well, the one thing you mentioned early on in this conversation, and it's also part of the name of the podcast, is going fast, and how important that is to actual success, whether that's tied to failing fast or failing small or anything, but just making sure that you are moving quickly. I find that is a theme in successful companies. And, how do you think about setting that culture on your team? How do you get people to have that mindset that they need to go experiment, they need to just move and take action? Is that inherent, just these are the people that you naturally gravitated towards hiring, or is that something that you are purposefully setting as part of the culture?
That's a great question. It's like you've asked it before. It's like your job is to ask great questions, and you're good at it. So I think the answer is 3, but I think the answer to most things in the universe is 3.
I like it.
So I think that I guess it's a couple things here. One, yeah, we just chose good people. I had worked all of them. Like, obviously, I want people that are aligned, and so we're naturally going to be aligned on our goals because they're the ones, that it shows.
I'm gonna interrupt you for a second and say that one of the lessons that I'm getting out of this that everybody should just take away is go raise a bunch of money and get a company really big and have it fail so that you can get a really good talent pool for your next company. That seems to be a really good lesson. I like it. It's a good methodology.
If I was to growth hack that one, though, I didn't have to do it myself. I could have just gone and talked to someone who did this.
Yeah.
And created,
get them
as an advisor. You get access to all of their failure. benefits without having to do it yourself. So that's my recommendation on that one.
I like that.
So yeah, get good people, get people that care. And all
Mm.
people that care want to go fast. No one wants to go slow. The reason why people end up going slow is because of complexity. And so that's why the answer is 3. Any company that wants to go fast, if they're trying to do more than 3 things, they will go slow. If you try to do one thing, you're like not doing enough things. If you're trying to do 2 things, not enough. 4 is too many. The answer is 3. So every quarter, say, what are the 3 things that we have to accomplish? And if you're a founder of a company saying those 3 things, you're wrong, remember? Because you're wrong 95% of the time. So you're more likely to be right about the 3 things if you have everyone participate. They know what we're trying to do. They're personally incentive in being successful. So ask them, what are the 3 most important things? And let it be a list of 15, and then these things all have to fight each other for the top 3 slots. Because once they've done that, you definitely are most likely to almost certainly have the right 3 things the company needs to do. If you do that quarterly, you can accomplish 3 things in a quarter. You can't accomplish 5. So that's max speed for your company, is those 3 things. There is no faster. So that's my recommendation on going fast, is do 3 things, evaluate them, measure them, pick the next 3, do those 3. And in not too long as your core idea is decent and you're putting that round peg in a round hole in the marketplace, you will grow fast.
That's great. That's really good advice. I think that's really powerful, and that's, I think, true across different team sizes. I think that very much is true across organizations and teams. Is focus. That's a theme that keeps coming up in all the conversations I'm having. It comes back to what is your focus, and you can only divide that focus so many times before you are no longer focused.
I would totally agree with that. And my guess is it's 3.
Yeah, 3. All right. Well,
3.
I guess 42 is not the right answer for this. So, well, one thing that I always have to bring up in these conversations, because the fans get mad if I don't, is, how, if at all, are you using AI, in your day-to-day, either as part of your personal workflows or as part of a product in the company or as a future state? What do you have AI on the mind?
Wait, I haven't heard about, what is this thing?
Yeah, exactly. It's spelled AI.
We talk about AI a lot. We use a lot of AI. I think a lot of places, you use it kind of in a rudimentary way now. We obviously use it for coding. If you have a dev team that isn't using AI to code, man, you're a dinosaur, I think, at this point, ready for extinction. Its ability to take raw questions and turn them into runnable code is fabulous. Probably doubles our speed or triples our speed, the amount fewer of engineers that we need because of the ability for, even easy tools or cheap tools like ChatGPT to write code for you is fabulous. If you're not using it, you got to. I think more about it, we're in the business of automating processes. And I listened to this interesting podcast, and this guy was talking about how they were using, I'm in the business of robotic process automation. If a human can log into a site and do something, it means you can write code that can replicate what that human is doing. And the nice thing about websites is that they were designed for people to use them. So this is sort of a natural fit. All we have to do is remove the effort of doing that. It's called robotic process automation. And there was a guy that was talking about how they're using AI to improve robotic process automation. But the challenge is accuracy. AI does nothing very accurately yet. It can write you awesome code, but you have to review it, you have to test it, you have to modify it before you can put it into production. It'll write you all kinds of great product copy, but you better read all of that product copy before you actually try to use it with anything. So if you want to use AI on the fly to solve problems, you have to do one of 2 things. You either have to accept that it's going to be highly inaccurate a significant percentage of the time, or you have to run it through some sort of refinement process. So when we look at this, we say, well, how is AI going to be used by other folks? I think that search-based shopping is going to be transformed, massively by generative language-based AI as opposed to just this keyword stuff we have today. So I'm like, how does the world change? Because customers will be using that type of search. We better redesign the way we are interacting with e-commerce platforms, how we give them content, how we keep it updated, how we look for new customers to find. And so there's an impact on the sort of product side. And the other thing we think about is like, how should we use it in our product? And I don't think the world is ready for AI deployed solutions yet. So back to the podcast where I started. I meander a lot. His point was, if you want AI to log into Amazon and buy something for you, like it's my mom's birthday, AI go, send her something. It will get it. It'll get something moderately correct about 70% of the time. And I don't know, maybe you don't care that much about your mom, but I love my mom. I'd like it to be better than a 70% experience for her. In order to get a better experience, you need millions and millions of searches and moms and presents getting received in order to have all of that feedback. And the mom's decisions need to stay pretty constant for a period of time for this system to learn enough to be good at that. And that's a very low value activity. Sending your mom a birthday present, important, but it's not worth millions of dollars.
You're a low value activity right here.
It's not $1 million business process.
Yes.
And so we're focused on how can we automate high value business processes. And so we still use this degree of humans and automation to like let the automation chew away as much of those human labor hours as possible and use just the minimal amount, just the right amount of human labor hours at the end of the process to make sure that the output of that is refined enough so that you're going to get a success metric of 99.99%, which is what business processes require. So for us, it's about reducing human labor hours, not automating everything. Where are there buckets of labor that we can make cheaper, more accurate, and faster? And so that's how our approach to AI will be, at least initially. And then it gets better over time. More and more hours go away. It gets more and more automated.
Yeah, no, it's it's the concept of human in the loop, but the goal is reduce the human part of that loop as much as is feasibly possible, right?
Oh, you just took my 15-minute speech and made it like a 30-second segment. Maybe I could. What are you doing for marketing? Maybe on a job.
Yeah, it's almost like that's what I do for a living, isn't it? No, but that is great, and I think that's what a lot of people are thinking about right now is around how does that apply. And you being in the automation business that's one of the most applicable businesses of AI right now. That it's you're automating the automations. That's what AI allows us to start to do, right? So that's really cool. Well, to start kind of wrapping up this conversation, I like to close out on if you have any recommendations for our listeners, whether it's a book, podcast, newsletter, anything really, your favorite desk chair, whatever floats your boat.
Recommendations. So my favorite podcast, and they haven't put out an episode in a while, which makes me sad, is Revisionist History. I just love that. It really has nothing to do with business of the company, but it does do a good job of saying, here's an idea and here's why you're thinking about something you're sure about. And to give you a little bit of information, you realize, man, everything I thought I knew about that was wrong. So I like that a lot about, and kind of helps me remind myself to rethink what your assumptions are.
That's Malcolm Gladwell, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's that. Yeah, and he's such a good storyteller too that you're just so engaged the whole time that he's talking because his pacing is just so good.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, some inflections kind of brings a lot of like personality to it. My other recommendation is just, my world got a lot easier when I stopped being as trying to be so professional. Like the more human I got and the more I shared with the team about, challenges in my personal life or, things, the more engaged they got and the more we actually started to work as a team. The more I told investors the real story rather than try to keep it to the nice, pretty deck with all the right words that you use. So the more you just sort of let yourself be you and you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the right answers to everything. In fact, the more wrong answers you give, the more likely they are to believe the right answers you do. So I think that was a big part of my learning journey. And And maybe the last one for founders is like, some days are good, some days are bad. It doesn't mean things are good or bad. These are all just waves crashing on a beach. So don't overreact to the highs or the lows. Watch where it is on average.
That's amazing. I couldn't have thought of better words to close this out with. Those are some great nuggets. So anybody who made it this far in the episode, there is your reward. That's fantastic. Well, Justin, I really appreciate you coming on today. This was really great. We'll have to check in another 6 to 12 months, see how much growth you've managed to achieve, and if you're sitting on a beach drinking martinis or something because your team is just doing all the work for you.
That's the dream, right?
That's the dream.